little bit about our speaker today, Adam Lewinberg. He's the president and CEO of Postal Advocate Inc., the only mail audit and recovery firm in the US and Canada. We manage a portfolio of over 188,000 pieces of mailing equipment and 73,000 online postage users for the largest US companies. He speaks and teaches nationally on mail savings and industry trends. He was the former industry co-chair for the Boston Postal Customer Council, and he was a member of the Mailing Systems Management Association with CMDSS and MDC certifications. He's also a featured writer for the Mailing Systems Technology magazine. He also worked for one of the largest mailing vendors for over 17 years as the director of national sales for Presort, tabletop inserters, addressing hardware, software, and green offerings. He was one of the top 5 account managers nationally, working with some of the largest accounts. Over to you, Adam.
Thank you, Doris. We are going to go over the most exciting topic that you guys have had in a long period of time. What you need to know about your postage meters to see if they're compliant, and what steps you have to take for those that aren't. So there have been, what we're going to cover on this call is the details of this change, the details of devices that are impacted by this change. We're going to how you create visibility to the equipment you have that needs to be migrated, what options you have for equipment, what are right-sizing strategies that we find can save up to 80%. There's enterprise online postage solutions that may be a good option for many of the organizations on this call. Planning and implementing, and then creating ongoing visibility and control. There's 3 different migration phases that are coming. The biggest is coming at the beginning, but there's 2 others, so you need to be compliant on all of these. So before we even get into the details of this, let's just talk about migration as a concept. This is not a new concept. But there have been postage migrations throughout the history of time where the post office has said certain technology about your meters is no longer compliant and isn't going to be used. And some examples are, you used to fill your meter at the post office. And then the post office said, well, you can no longer fill your meters at the post office. You have to fill your meters over the phone through a phone call. And then they stopped doing that, and they said, no, new meters have to be filled, through through an analog connection, directly, and then through a network connection, and then meters had to have different imprints on them. So there have been these types of migrations throughout time. The difference of this one, which we'll go into, is this is in my 29 years in this industry, this is the largest population that's needed to be moved at a single point in time. So what you see in the bold, 60 to 70% of the postage meters in the United States today are going to be impacted by this change. Previous migrations, there have been a smaller percentage of the population that was being impacted. So what's happening is the USPS is decertifying all information-based indicia meters, compliant meters, by June 30th, 2024. New devices must be Intelligent Mail Indicia, IMI compliant, or will no longer be approved for use. Current IBI devices need to be, so it's not I can just retrofit a chip in my device, or I can just add a part. If you have a mail machine, you have to replace that mail machine with a brand new mail machine. The vendors aren't doing swaps that we've heard. You have to physically order a new device. USPS is doing this because they want more information about the mail you're sending. They want a higher level of connectivity to meters. Older style meters, what happens is you hit the refill button on the meter, it connects to the network or through some sort of connection, gets your $500 of postage, and then disconnects. New meters have to be constantly connected at all times. That's going to be a challenge for some organizations who don't want their meters on the network all the time. And again, we estimate that 60 to 70% of these postage meters in the United States are going to be impacted by this change. There's a potential for some supply chain issues because it's such a short period of time, but I would suspect the meter vendors have planning around this to make sure that they can comply and get as many of these devices shipped and ordered. The value of the USPS, and the reason they're doing this, is they want to automate their operations. They want higher security due to a rise in threats and challenges. They want to validate that you put the correct postage amounts on. You're going to be able to issue refunds. If you overpost something in the future, you're going to be able to issue a refund through the meter device versus having to fill out those special forms and bring to the post office. And they're going to have more control over what's entering their network. So these are the products impacted that we know about today. So now you should validate these models with your mailing vendors. This is the most up-to-date list that we've gotten. From Pitney Bowes, what you'll notice in this first round, which is June 30th, 2024, is it's mostly the lower to medium end units. It's not the high end units. If you have a production site with Pitney Bowes mail centers or Quadient IS5 or 6,000 machines, or Connect Plus 1 and 2, 3,000s from Pitney Bowes, those units aren't going to be compliant to be changed until 12/31/27. You've got a couple of years. But the biggest percentage of the meter market in the United States is smaller mid-sized units, which are the ones that are being required to be replaced. So you should validate the units with your vendor. If you have FP, we just don't have a great list from FP. They represent about 5 to 6% of the meter market. You might want to call them or go into their websites to see what they're stating on it. But this list from Pitney Bowes and Quadient represent about 95% of the industry, and this will give you, at least for the majority of you, this list should help tell you what's needed. The meters that are required to change by 12/31/26 are the production mail meters. So the meters that would go on the end of a console and inserter that are geared for like higher volume production mail spends. And then the meters from 12/31/27 are, like I said, the highest volume units that are out there. So this is what we find are the client's challenges with migration. So the biggest is network connectivity. All meters have to be constantly connected versus just being connected at the time they're refilled. There's IT issues. Some IT departments don't want meters on the network constantly, especially when we deal with things like government, financial services, healthcare, that have higher security requirements. They don't want to deal with that. You can go to the meter vendors and they have mobile connectors that you can use, bypassing your own IT infrastructure. They can do these real-time connections and be also always connected. Think of it like a mobile plan for your mobile phone, but they're expensive. So you have to decide if you can work through your IT issues, the cost. If you replace a machine that you had from 3 years ago with a brand new machine from the mailing vendors today on a like-for-like basis, it's typically going to be more expensive. All the mailing vendors have had significant price increases. With COVID, with supply chain issues, they've all raised their prices just like everything else in all of the industries out there. Creating visibility to the equipment that you have. So we work with a lot of organizations that have lots of locations. Sometimes it's little as like 10 or 20, and sometimes it's as much as in the thousands. And the hardest part is very few companies have a good list of where their equipment is to even know what needs to be replaced. We're going to talk about that and things you can do in your own space to figure that out. Collecting the requirements for the new equipment. What does each machine need? There's some right-sizing opportunities in this space if you can figure out the right requirements for the equipment. Bidding the cost between vendors, implementing new units, returning old equipment, refunding postage from the old units. This is an issue if you're going to need, especially an issue if you change vendors. If you have a multi-account for postage that everybody shares and you're staying with the same vendor, the money goes back into that account. We find that's not the norm. Most people have separate postage accounts and they have to validate that the money gets refunded back to them. And there's only 9 months to make this change. So let's talk about creating visibility. So we manage the biggest postal fleet in the United States, about 188,000 pieces of mailing equipment under management. So what we do for clients is we pull this visibility together in a central way so it can be managed and they can have visibility to what their spends are. But what I'm going through here are the steps that we take when we're creating visibility. You can do this yourself with the steps that we're giving. If you need help with this, we'll do a no-cost analysis, or let's say build you this inventory for free at no cost or obligation for any future services if you have 20 or more locations. But if not, or if you want to do this yourself, these are the steps. So first, you need to obtain the account numbers for all your equipment and your leases throughout your locations. The equipment models. To see if they match the list above, you need serial numbers. So when you log things into the vendor's websites, you need 2 pieces of information. You need an account number and a serial number of one of the items on it. When you log those 2 pieces, it goes onto the vendor's website, and then you can pull more information. From some of the vendor websites, you can get the contract expiration dates, you can get mail volumes, and then what features are in the current solutions today, and then what do you need to figure out if you're going to need in the new solutions. So our methodology is that we use for clients, and that you should use the same thing, is see if you have any reports or agreements provided by the mailing vendors. Some people have reports, some don't. Go to your accounts payable office and do a search on the main mailing vendor name. So there's Quadient, Pitney Bowes, Stamps.com, Frankentype, Postalia. Those are the main mailing vendors. Some of them fund through those vendor names, some of them fund through the Postal Service. From that accounts payable list, request copies of invoices of specific items from that you think would be unique to each location. The invoice copy is going to have the details about the name, the account number, potentially a serial number that you need to create the logins. Create an account on the meter vendor's websites, and then link each account number that you find in serial number to that account. And then search the online account for postage usage, contract expiration dates, equipment details, and then call the meter vendors to fill in any of the holes of the data that's not there. So these are the steps that you need because you want to get visibility to where the equipment is. If you have one location, this is a very simple thing. If you have lots of locations, this is obviously more challenging. Mailing solutions. So this is the gamut of what's available for mailing solutions. So let's start with standalone meters for a second. We'll talk about online postage in a second. Standalone meter is a small box, and you stamp the piece of mail, and then you pull the piece out, or it runs left to right. Then you have, and those systems range from about $25 to $100 a month. There's automatic feed mail machines where you stack a pile of mail onto a feeder and it runs it through, and those are $170 to $300 a month. Then there's automatic feed machines with an internal weighing system. So as it runs through the machine, it weighs each piece of mail. Those are $350 to $600 for mid-volume units and $700 to $1,300 a month for high-volume units. So you can see the gamut of postage equipment ranges from $25 to $1,300 a month based on the features that you have. And this is the reason why right sizing is so important, because if you're buying larger equipment than's needed, there's smaller options that could probably suffice for the job and save considerable amounts of money. There's two solutions for the low to medium end that people are considering, which is online postage, which we'll go into more detail on. That's typically in the $10 to $30 a month. But if you have an enterprise of people, where you have people scattered all over the country, there's an enterprise versions of that where you can manage all your users on one platform for all your sites, and it's a lower per cost basis, in the $1 to $10 per month, based on what features you've set up on these. So we find where our average as a company is about 55% of when we're right sizing equipment. That's our average. If we're moving people to online postage systems, we're closer into the 90% range. But these are the things that you need to think about when you're right sizing equipment. One, does the internal weighing system and automatic feeding systems justify the cost based on the mail volumes? So that internal weighing option costs $200 to $300 a month, and that automatic feeding option is $100 to $200 a month. So you can see those two features add $300 to $500 per month to a cost of a machine. Many offices have those features and they think that they need those, but their mail volumes may not justify having that. Do you need heavy capacity scales from the mailing vendors? So higher capacity scales are usually 10, 15, 30, 70, $149, 149 pounds. Those add $30 to $100 per month to your agreement. There's standard scales that are 5 pounds that we recommend. If you need heavier capacities, instead of having an integrated scale in the mail machine, go to Staples or your office supply store. You can buy a 150-pound electronic scale one time for $113. That would look like the one I showed you. All the features in your system being currently utilized. There's a lot of options you can have on mail accounting, custom weighing, conveyor stackers, special services. These things add cost, and they may be totally justified in your application, but they need to be validated that they're needed and broken out when you're speaking to the meter vendors of what do those features cost. Can online postage be an option versus lower volume meters? There's 20% plus postage savings for parcels. It can be expanded to UPS and FedEx processing, and we'll give you more information on this. And like I said, if you have more than 10 locations, you should really consider enterprise online postage options, because it's the game changer of where the industry is going. We'll give you more information on that. So what is online postage? So online postage is from any computer being able to access a service that allows you to print postage. It's usually a subscription model. You can print from any computer with an internet connection and a printer. You don't need dedicated printers. You can use whatever printer is connected. Most people will do postage, that we're talking about postage stamps and shipping labels, but postage stamps is probably the most common service. And you get these sheets of stamps like you see in this picture here. Each sheet of stamps has a serial number on the upper right. You enter that serial number into your system, into the platform, and then you say, I want to print 7 of these stamps and 2 of this denominations. And then you put the sheet in your printer and you print the stamps. And if you only printed 10 of the 20 or 25 stamps, the next time you go to use that sheet from that serial number of the sheet, it grays out the ones you already printed, so you start at the next position. You can print directly onto the envelope, which is great. If people can do it, not everyone is comfortable feeding an envelope through their printer. So usually most people default to the stamp sheets, or you could have a dedicated printer, a label printer that you could use. It could be at your desk. The only issue with that is then it's geared to just one person at their computer versus having it be accessible to everyone in the office. 4x shipping labels for priority mail can be printed. You can either use regular paper and just, cut or tape it to your piece, or you can use Avery type label stock that you get at your office supply store and print it down. The reason there are more online postage subscriptions than there are postage meters in the United States today. It's not a newfangled thing. It is at least as there's about 700,000 postage meters, we believe, in the United States. And there's about 800,000 or 900,000 online subscriptions of postage through this type of methodology. And the reason people use it is because it's inexpensive compared to postage meters. Typical costs range from about $10 to $30 per month versus $30 to $1,300 for meters. It's cloud-based. It can be accessed from any device. It's easy to deploy. Within 7 to 10 days, you receive login credentials. Some vendors include a scale and starter supplies. There's simple online tutorials to get started. With postage meters, all you have is the visibility to the refills typically, unless you have more custom accounting packages. This gives visibility to every single item that was printed, who printed it, what class of service. Every transaction has visibility. Some systems have multiple carrier options like UPS and FedEx, and there's significant postage savings. So you can see in this chart below, if you're doing a 1-ounce stamp, if you buy a stamp at the post office at 66 cents, if you use a postage meter at 63 cents, and online postage also gets the same 63 cents. But if you're doing parcels, like if you're doing ground advantage, priority mail, you could see the savings. The savings are huge, and some of the vendors have negotiated service agreement discounts with the Postal Service that are built into their platform, giving significant savings on these types of pieces. And if you look at these percentage savings on parcels, it ranges from 21 to 40% on parcels, which is huge. This is a weird concept, and I'm going to get on a soapbox for a second and talk about this because it's true. In the United States, there is, when we talk about 700,000 postage meters, 800,000 online postage users, it's about 1.5 million subscriptions or rentals or leases of some postal technology solution. There are 25 million offices. So it means that basically 90% of organizations have 90% of locations in large companies or organizations have no mailing service, including people who work from home. So think about for a second how you process mail today. Do offices have a postage meter? They spend $30 to $1,300. Do they use an online postage account? They pay a single standalone. They pay $10 to $30 per month. Most organizations, though, send end users to the post office to buy stamps, and they're paying a 5 to 70% premium over the cost of using online solutions. Plus, they have to go to the post office, and plus, they don't have the exact denominations of postage they need when things are at different price points, because they're typically only buying 1-ounce stamps. Or many organizations in healthcare and in banking, as an example, they courier mail back and forth to facilities to get that piece of mail to a central mail center and print it. And the courier cost could be $5 to $15 per pickup. There's no process that's defined across an organization. The location determines how mail gets processed, and there's no visibility outside of core mail hubs to any of the mail spends across the locations. Now compare that to UPS or FedEx. which is a much more complicated transaction than printing a stamp. With UPS or FedEx, people use typically free UPS and FedEx tools, enterprise tools, FedEx.com, FedEx Ship Manager, Campus Ship from UPS, UPS.com. They log all their users under these platforms. Every user does it in the exact same way throughout the organization. And then at the end of the week or month, corporate gets a bill broken down by cost center to charge back all the users throughout the company for their shipments. So if you're in one of those 90% of locations that have no access to mail services, it's going to be much easier for you to send a FedEx than a 63-cent letter because you don't want to drive to the post office. And that's the wrong message. It's the wrong message to push people to more expensive services because there's no technology. The reason I'm going through this dissertation, and this is what's happening in America today around mail, is there's new enterprise tools that take the online postage that I showed you, but put it in an enterprise platform where it can support an entire organization across all of their locations. Instead of having to pay a separate subscription price per location, some of the vendors offer models where it's one subscription that supports all the locations. And it brings the price of use down and supports all the users in the same way you would support with UPS. So you can create that same UPS or FedEx online experience with mail. And the reason people use this is because it's simplicity. They use these enterprise versions is because it's simplicity in onboarding new users, recording of all locations and user activities from a central dashboard. You can manage the billing and subscription, supplies, and postage centrally. You can control the user access of the people. These systems have single sign-on options, and single sign-on is a game changer for a lot of large organizations because the moment someone clicks on a link, they don't need a username and password to get in, and the moment they're no longer employed by their company, they're booted out. The free UPS and FedEx tools that they use today don't have that feature, so they have to manage their users. And oftentimes companies aren't deleting users who are no longer employed, meaning that they still have access to those services after they're no longer employed. These platforms can be expanded to UPS and FedEx, and they can do real-time rate shopping where you can see package options by lowest to highest price or by day of week and time of day you need to get it there, which provides a savings opportunities because people now don't just go to one platform for FedEx and another platform for the Postal Service. They get to see them all in one place. And in many cases, there's a savings not just with switching from the FedEx or UPS to the Postal Service, it's a savings of FedEx to FedEx. Because what the free FedEx and UPS systems don't show you is that ground service is guaranteed in zones 2, which is usually around 200 miles from your destination. So it's guaranteed next day delivery shipping at a lower cost ground service than the air services they think they have to send. The free tools don't show ground and air in the same screen next to each other on purpose because they don't want you making that determinations. These platforms can have electronic return receipt platforms that can save $1.25 per return receipt. They can give you manifests or firm mail books that can be delivered to the post office and rubber stamped. They can show you every certified mail piece that you've delivered throughout your entire company and if they're delivered or not, and they can give you your signatures automatically downloaded into a central repository. Technology of this has grown in leaps and bounds. And if you have more than 10 locations, we recommend having this type of controlled enterprise experience. This to us, what we're finding from our client set is this is the future of mail. It doesn't make any sense that we have this structure of how people process their mail, especially with people working from home and in remote offices with no visibility to it. If we can put this on a cloud and then have uniform enterprise access, it provides a better experience at a lower cost with better discounts and the ability to control an expense category that's currently not in a control set. Where we come into this for clients is we help manage these platforms. We act as the central administrator to these platforms. We help the client do everything from defining the requirements, implementing the systems, training their users, onboarding them in the platform, managing their user access, whether it's single sign-on or username and password, case management. There needs to be one person, whether you administer these platforms yourself or you want a third party like us to do it, You need someone to handle the user issues. You don't want them calling the vendors directly at each location if they have a question, because the vendor may not be able to take over your system and make those changes. So we create a landing page for our clients with the most common issues. They log in who they are. The case gets created, sent to our agent, and sent to the user. We respond within 2 hours, and we take care of all of the issues, and then we document what those issues were, because if we're getting the same issues over and over, we want to produce an FAQ guide that can go out to them. We monitor the usage. We do reporting and chargeback, because everyone wants reporting so they can charge back the postage spends and the shipping spends on a monthly basis. We quantify the savings, we expand and promote use, and then we manage the return of any meter devices, including the postage refunds. So you don't need a third party to do this, but most companies don't have people designed to manage these platforms, and this can make it easier. And since this is our core focus, we think we can do it better than anyone. Regardless, with this migration, you need to have planning and implementation. You need to create an inventory report. You need to document the postage spends by location. If you don't have the postage spends and the usage levels, you can't properly right size this equipment. You have to understand what features and locations are needed. You have to compare pricing between multiple vendors, order the new solutions, validate the new solutions are installed, remove current solutions, validate that postage gets recovered. And we have found for our clients millions of dollars in lost and dormant postage. Because you think about this, and people forget this. A postage meter is a bank. It holds money. And there's money sitting in the physical meter device, and there's also money sitting in a pre-funded postage account with the mailing vendor. And that postage account might be something that you pre-fund money, or it might be one that you borrow money from them in sort of an advanced environment. When the meter gets returned, the money goes back to that account. But does anyone think to fill out the postage refund request form to get that money back in a check and manage that process? And when you have large organizations with disparate locations, or there's transitions, or people change vendors, people forget to do that. And there's actually millions of dollars we found in the unclaimed funds offices. We have a database of 50,000 plus transactions of meters that have been returned where people have forgotten to go back and get their money. We know this happens. We've collected this money for our clients, but it's something that has to be managed. Ongoing visibility and control. It's important to keep a master list or database of your mailing equipment, your contract terms, your spend, your invoices, and postage balances for the following reasons. There's ongoing right sizing that needs to happen. There are multiple phases of this right sizing that are happening. There's 2026, and there's 2027. Invoice validations. The vendors are not perfect billers. They make mistakes. We've recovered $19 million from our clients overbilling because the meter vendors make mistakes on bills. If you're not validating that the invoices are correct, validating against equipment that you have out there, you're overpaying in some areas that can be recovered. Postage management, we talked about that. We've recovered $13 million for our clients in dormant postage. These are the places where you need to look to find this money. Overfunded meters. This is a crazy thing, but we find sometimes people put their refills on autopilot and they say, fill every month for $2,000. But that office stopped doing any real mailing. And sometimes we'll find $20,000, $30,000, $50,000 sitting in these meter accounts. Pre-funding accounts. Sometimes people dump a huge amount of money into their pre-funded account and money just sits there. The usage of that office is only $100 a month, but there's $20,000 sitting in an account to fund that. It would take 20 years to get rid of that money. Advance accounts. Similar to pre-funding, sometimes they have large credit balances. And sometimes people use both types of accounts interchangeably, and then money gets confused and just sits. State's unclaimed funds offices, Pitney Bowes turns funds over to the state's unclaimed funds offices. It's a best-in-class process. Other vendors, because they don't have their own bank, don't. Post office controls the money. So whether it's a postage meter or a permit account, post office's process, if you have a postage meter or a permit account that's funded by them, is after 2 years of inactivity, they send one letter to the person who took the permit out or the meter out originally, and they say there are funds available for you to collect. After that one letter, they will never notify you again. The issue being that that person may no longer be there, or it might be in an office that's closed. And this is a problem that happens. The post office will provide no database or list any of these funds that are out there. USPS and Quadient and FP, you don't use their own banks, so they follow that same postage process. Location summaries, location support, make sure your offices have the best mailing options for support available. Manage future migrations we talked about, and to offset future USPS price increases. Postage costs have gone up basically 23% in the last 2 years. It's the highest increase we've had. You can expect 2 rate increases a year. If you don't have visibility to your mail spends, these things can get out of whack. So this is what we do. We have saved our clients $85 million in savings in this category. We're managing 188,000 pieces of equipment, including 73,000 managed enterprise online postage users. We've recovered $24 million in lost postage, vendor overcharges, and fees. And the majority of our team came from the mailing industry. We have 237 years of combined experience in this and have created the only web-based tools that we provide our clients an enterprise dashboard of their spends for them to have visibility to what's happening. We're managing the inventory for them. We provide it on a dashboard, give them the access they need. Our clients are every industry, it doesn't make any difference. We handle 2 accounts in the Fortune 10. We handle most of our accounts in the majority of our accounts in the Fortune 5,000. And we have also lots of other smaller accounts that just happen to have, decent location counts or disparate mail needs. For any client, we'll do a no-cost analysis of their mail spends. We'll show them the inventory of all their equipment. We'll build them plans to help comply with these migration requirements. From there, you make a decision if it makes sense to look at us and use us as a partner. If you do decide, then we'll go forward. We'll issue any of the credits and lost postage funds that we found. We'll help you negotiate pricing, and then we'll work directly with your end users on asset validations, right-sizing, terminates, and implementing whatever solutions you want. We don't make any decisions for you. We make all decisions for you. We get your approvals for everything. We manage it in an enterprise dashboard, and we provide ongoing support. For clients, usually have things, leases will expire at different times. There'll be acquisitions, mergers, divestitures. There's always something happening with people's mail portfolios. If they need help, we support it ongoing. It's not a one-stop shop. It's not a do it and then leave it. We're managing it for our clients long term. Any client will do a no-cost mail analysis if you have 20 or more locations. It doesn't have to be 20 locations with equipment, but if you at least have 20 locations, we'll do the search to figure out what you have. What we need for this is a letter of authority. It just gives us approval to research your mailing spends. If you have any mailing reports, current or historical, we'll take them. Historical are great too, because we find a lot of account numbers that are no longer active. And from that, we can go see if there's any dormant postage in those accounts that no one collected. We ask for an accounts payable file from these vendor names. And these main vendors might operate under some different names, as you can see here. From the accounts payable file, that usually doesn't have enough detail for us to be able to, optimize it. So we'll ask for some PDF copies of specific invoices that we'll select from the list. If you want us to look at UPS and FedEx and do a rate shop compare to see what the options are to optimize through these platforms, we'd ask for 1 to 6 months of detail and then meet with us to review the results. And the outcomes that you'll get are a full equipment inventory, contract details, so we'll tell you when every contract expires through your plan. We'll give you the postage spends of all your locations, so you know exactly the postage amount. We'll list what equipment needs to be migrated, and we'll provide an optimized plan that maximizes savings. It might be enterprise mail. If all your locations are high volume, that wouldn't be an appropriate solution, and we'll tell you what right sizing of that equipment. So we do these types of educational seminars. One, obviously, because we think there isn't enough education in the mail space. So hopefully this gave you the information about migration. Everything we talked about you can do with or without us. It's not like you have to use us in order to do that, but it gives us an opportunity to at least explain to you the services we do that hopefully can add some value in the future if it's needed. So I want to thank everyone for coming to this meeting, and I want to open it up to any questions.
Thanks, Adam. And just as a reminder, if you have any questions, you can either put your hand up and I can unmute you so you can ask your question, or if you feel more comfortable just typing it in the chat box, you can also do that. First question, will there be a copy of this presentation available? Yes, tomorrow morning at around the same time as right now, there will be a post-webinar email that will also send a link to a copy of the presentation as well as the recording. Next question, will the post office change the date for these changes?
So we haven't heard that they're doing this. This has been going on for, we've been notified about this about 2 years ago. We haven't heard them push back the dates. There were a couple models that we found that they moved from like the 24 date to the 27 date on the higher end for Quadient. They made some changes that we've heard, relatively recently. But I don't expect that this 2024 date with the equipment that we showed is going to be pushed back. But you never know with the post office.
And next question, why are they doing this?
They're doing this because they're competing with UPS and FedEx, who have an amazing amount of data on items. And then they have these meters that, basically aren't constantly connected. They only connect, periodically. They can't control what those locations are doing, their balances, their meter security levels. And they're trying to get their network so they have full visibility to all the spend that's going through their networks. So that's the reason, I believe.
Do you find a lot of pushback when you're transitioning people from meters to online postage?
We don't actually, and it's surprising. When we do fleets, it's a question of how it's positioned. If it's positioned that we have a new initiative and it's going to save the organization a ton of money, and we want everybody on a call, and this is the new standard for low volume postage, and there's an exception process that you can use if this isn't going to work for your particular operation, it seems to work relatively flawless, and we get very few people ever applying for any exceptions. If it's something that you have to go location by location and convince them that they should make a change, usually that's for lower volume meter sites, and they're gonna, people are change resistant. So it's all really on the way it's positioned. When it's positioned as a national initiative, it goes smooth. It goes incredibly smoothly. But like I said, there are more online postage users in the United States than there are postage meters. So it's not like this is brand new technology. Any other questions? I want to thank everybody for being on the call today. Please let us know if there's any services that we can do for you. If you ever want us to do one of these no-cost analyses to provide you your inventory list, we're happy to do it and happy to help. And thank you for being on the call.